Call the meeting back to order. We called to order at 5:30, had an executive session, and now we are in our regular meeting. The first item on our agenda is a public hearing for a new malt and vinous liquor license for Bleecker and Greer doing business as Main Street Meats at 310 Commercial Street in Rockport. And the way these public hearings work is that I will ask if anybody wishes to comment in favor, and then if anybody wishes to comment against, and if anybody wishes to comment neither for nor against, and then I will close the public hearing. And then later in our agenda, we have an item to act on this particular issue. So I will open the public hearing for this issue at 7:03 and ask if anybody wishes to comment in favor of this new liquor license for Bleecker and Greer. Come up to the microphone, please. Give your name and make your comment.
My name is Doc Wallace. I live on Union Street in Rockport. This probably is unnecessary, but I strongly endorse Sarah Greer's application. We're well familiar with her business. We think it's a tremendous attribute to the town. We're loyal customers. And we'll do everything we can to support her. I've even offered to help move on the day that she is involved in transferring from one site to the other. So on behalf of the Wallace family here tonight, we support Sarah Greer's application.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to comment in favor of this application? Hearing none, does anybody wish to comment in opposition to this application? Hearing none, does anybody wish to comment neither for nor against this application? And hearing none, I will close the public hearing at 7:05. Moving on, we have several sets of minutes to act on. And so I would entertain a motion on the minutes of October 29th, the emergency meeting, executive session meeting minutes of the Select Board.
So moved. Second.
A motion and a second to approve those minutes as presented. Any discussion, comment? All in favor? Any opposed? Okay. That motion is approved. On to the Select Board meeting minutes for December 3rd, 2018. We have those in front of us. I await a motion on those minutes.
I move we approve the meetings from December 3rd as presented.
For a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on these minutes?
Yes. So on the third page at the top, and this is a question to you, Ken. It says we already have one of the best fundraisers around. We will not move forward until the money has been pledged. Did you say that? I don't recall you saying that because, as you know, there's certain findings that need to be made in the bond.
Yeah, I don't know that I
Article.
used those words. I probably said what the bond language said. We wouldn't move forward unless there was an
I think you read the bond.
opposition, or not opposition, what's the word I'm looking for? Would not move forward until it was obvious that the fundraising would be successful or something of that nature.
Yeah.
Didn't you read
I
from the
thought that you
warrant
did
article?
move from, I think you did read from the bond
Yeah.
article.
I may, I don't, it's come up so many different times, I may have. Yeah, actually, I did on that meeting.
Yeah.
I did,
Yeah.
at some
Yeah.
point, yeah.
I guess then we should strike that sentence. I don't know what the
I would
proper
just strike it.
parliamentary.
I would strike it because whatever he said is on live stream, so we don't need
Yes, I
to
think
replace it.
that's, I think we just strike the sentence, that's fine.
And this is a nit. It says down in the bold paragraph, Deborah Hall moved to appoint Jeffrey Payson. It did talk about how Jeff Hamilton said he was going to abstain, but it does in the vote say vote 4-0 opposed, 1 abstention. I would just say Hamilton abstained, just to make it abundantly clear.
That's a correction.
And if I could just add to that, just the line before that where it says in the spirit of things, it wasn't quite that general. I said in the spirit of assuring no conflict of interest.
I have some on the next page.
Okay.
Okay, sorry, typo, it's like third of the way down, it says Jeff. Any expenses for the new library should be assigned to the project. This means the demo works, take out the S, that is being done, is being done this week. Or this means the demo work that is being done this week. And then the next one says, Doug, can you show us an estimate of, you need to put in the word how much the cost is. Catch this? And then the next page,
Yeah, before you jump to
Sorry.
the next page.
Yep.
I had a question about, twice here Jeff says that all of the work, including that done by Public Works, town government, needs to be moved to the cost of the project. Are we going to talk about this later? Rick has some numbers for us, because I'm not sure I agree with that sentiment.
Well, the
but
only
I
thing we're
guess
doing
it's
here
just
is.
his accuracy,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, did he say
Okay.
that? And I
Yep.
think
Okay.
he
I did
probably
say that.
yeah.
Yep, okay.
so on the next page?
Okay, we're on page 5 now?
On page 5, yeah, almost halfway down, it says Deborah. I raised the question of a parabolic mirror at the library intersection, and then I said there have been several near misses, not never misses, near misses of accidents on that corner. And on the next page, right above the bold where it says Deborah Hall moved to approve the town, right above that, it says, the board discussed this item. There were questions if we rent the poles or if we purchase the lights, it should be comma, are we responsible for the maintenance? The point is, the comma was in the wrong place and it can change the meaning of the sentence. And I don't think any of the rest of them weren't this bad. Not bad, but I mean, I don't have as many comments on the rest of the minutes. But there's another one now on page 7, at the very top. We should pass it on to Bill Napier to review, not the Bill Napier.
Okay.
And the very last one, thank you for bearing with me here, is on page 8. And where we're talking about, it's the responsibility, we were talking about what we're gonna say in the sexual harassment policy, so this needs to be precise. After, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th line, it says Main Street, Rockport, Maine, 04856, semicolon, there's a paren that needs to go in there. And we should make sure that the sexual harassment policy has that. Okay?
But there's a parentheses that's at the end of the,
There's a parentheses at the end, but there's not a beginning parentheses, that's the point.
I see one,
Just before PO.
For the PO
for the
box.
strike of P.O. Box. At the end of the 4th line.
Gotcha, you're right, thank you, I'm wrong. Okay, so hopefully the sexual harassment policy, we have it right too. Okay, yeah, you're right, you guys, okay, that's all I had.
Anything else? Okay, Linda, did you get all that stuff? Okay. So we'll vote on the motion as corrected on these minutes. All in favor of approving them as corrected? Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. Okay, Friday, December 14th.
I move we approve the executive session meeting minutes from Friday, December 14th,
Second,
2018, as presented.
sorry,
And
second.
then a second. Any discussion on these? All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, that's a 5-0 vote. And the executive session, Monday, January 7th of 2019. Motion on those minutes?
I motion we approve the minutes of the executive session meeting on Monday, January 7th as presented.
Second,
Any discussion?
No.
If not, all in favor? Okay, that passes 5-0. Okay, announcements. Our next select board meeting we'll have a second select board meeting this month. It'll be on Monday, January 28th, 7 o'clock here, and it will be streamed. As far as the town office will be closed on Monday, January 21st, a week from today, in observation of Martin Luther King Day. We do have some committee openings, and we'll have some more, actually, as we go through the meeting tonight. And I will urge townspeople who would like to serve on a committee to pick up an application and fill it out, and we would love to have you. There's a lot of work good work that's done by these committees, and it's a good way to participate in your town. Even if a committee that you're interested in has a full roster, we do have the provision for having alternate members, and that's a really good way to get to know the committee at that point. Do we have any agenda changes? Do we have the applicants for the liquor license here?
Yeah, Sarah's here.
Okay. I might suggest, we have that item fairly low down in the new business. I might suggest that we take that up prior to the town manager's report, if that's suitable to the board.
I would
So-
agree, we did that last time in order for respecting people's time.
And I don't know, does anybody else have any other agenda changes?
What about the license?
That's what we just talked about.
The, oh, that was the other one. My bad.
Or anything else? The only other thing I will say, we'll see when we get there, I got a text from Owen saying that
Yeah.
he's running a little behind. He hopes to be here, so when we get to that item, he's got family care issues to deal with.
I've been
so.
dealing with the same issue.
But at any rate, we'll see, so, okay. So that being the case, we will then move to public comment. Public comment should be directed at issues not under discussion on this evening's agenda. Comment from the public will be welcome prior to each agenda item. Further comment will be granted only by permission from the board. All public comment should be brief and to the point, and if you wish to make a public comment, we ask you to come up to the podium and use the microphone so the folks at home can hear what you have to say. Does anybody wish to make public comment at this time? Okay, hearing none, we will then move on to the new business item approving the new malt and vinous liquor license for Bleecker and Greer doing business as Main Street Meats. And I will entertain a motion on that.
The only thing I would change on the application, because it's inaccurate, it indicates a school is the closest place, and it's actually a church by 5/10 of a mile or so. And the school is down the street a little further, but the church at the corner of Cross and Route 90.
Oh, yep.
Well, I think that this application has already been filed, I believe, with the state. Okay, well, if it hasn't been filed, then that change could certainly be made.
Nothing big, but
I haven't measured the distances on the map, so I don't know, you must have done it. Is there,
yeah, I mean, yeah, it's just, yep.
so again, I will await a motion on this item. We can discuss after the motion is made.
Yeah. I move to approve the new Malton Venus liquor license for Bleecker and Greer doing business as Main Street Meats as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion on the motion.
Just ask that item 17 regarding distance between school and church be corrected prior to submission to the state.
Any other thoughts? We have memo from the police chief endorsing the application. We have the diagram of the premises. Perhaps if you could come up and just tell us a little bit about how you're going to structure things and how the business will work, that might be helpful.
And I could ask a quick question, too. We were provided with two floor plans. One shows a door that goes out onto the deck, and then the other one does not. And there
Guess I'd
is
have to
going to be a
see.
door, and what I'm referring to is next to the meat refrigerator. Oh, wait a minute, maybe that's the new front door there.
Thank you. I'm
Door
Sarah,
over-
by the way.
Never mind, I stand corrected here. I see you have a double swinging door there, okay.
Okay.
Okay, what Anything specific I could
Just a
clarify?
general thought about what the business is gonna do and what you're gonna be
Sure,
serving and things
well-
of that nature and how the liquor license.
For those of
factors
you
in.
who are not familiar with our current business, we are a specialty food retailer, and we are renovating the old Hoboken Schoolhouse, and we will move our specialty food business into that building. And in addition to that, we are going to be offering a small cafe. And with the cafe, we would like to be able to serve beer and wine. At the moment, we can only seat, well, maybe 8 people inside. We are in the process of building a deck for seasonal use outside. And we anticipate maybe 15, 25 more seats or so outside, depending on how we configure the tables for seasonal use. The shop consists of baked goods, a butcher department, a grocery section, and then prepared foods to take out. And with the addition of the cafe, we will now be able to offer prepared foods to sit down and enjoy while you're there at a table. And we'll have very simple table service. You will come up to a counter and place your order and pay for the food, find a table, and we'll have wait staff come and bring the food to you and bus the tables. In a nutshell, that's pretty much what
That's
we're
great. That's
planning to
helpful.
do. Our hours of operation, certainly through Memorial Day of 2019, will be Monday through Saturday, 9 to 6.
Does anybody have any questions for Sarah?
Well, I would like to go back to my original question,
Yes.
because now that I got my head back around these plans,
Sure.
over near the public toilet on this plan
Yeah.
here, you show a door to the deck,
Yes.
but on this plan here, the other one, that door isn't there. And I'm just curious, which one is correct?
Oh, I see, yeah, this one, well, there is a door to the deck.
Okay, from
Yes.
that area?
Yes.
Okay, all right,
Yep.
Are these-
And that is on the cafe side.
right.
Are these plans showing the same floor, or are there 2 stories, or?
One was just a sort of enlargement,
Okay,
yep.
okay, yeah, oh, I see, all right, okay. Anybody else have any questions of the applicant?
No.
Okay, any further discussion on the motion? If not, all in favor of the motion? Any opposed? No?
We wish you well.
Yes.
Best of
Good
luck with the business.
Yeah,
and
look
Can't wait
forward
till
to
you're
it.
open.
Glad to have you,
Thank you.
another business in that area in Rockport.
A few more weeks, folks,
When do you plan to open?
pretty much. We're shooting for February 5th, but it may be a little bit after that. We'll see. We get all our ducks in a row. Thank you
Good.
very much.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Town manager's report, Mr. Town Manager. And it's been our custom more recently to not have the town manager go through the report in great detail, but if there's any questions the board has for the manager, or if the
What-
manager has anything in specific that you'd like to add, then
One thing you'll see on your, an update in your for your package is a revised memo about the cost for the demo of the building, and it does include wages for the employees that would, the Public Works guys that actually did the work of demoing the building.
I'm sorry, where is that in the
Just
package?
hand it
Single.
out.
Yeah, I just
Sorry.
handed it out, yeah.
Right there.
It's, and the wages for that is $4,992 in cost.
You know, and again, I'd like to just question, including the Public Works time. I get the concept of what we're trying to do, but the problem is, if you do this just for the library, it seems to me you need to start doing it for every other town
Absolutely.
project.
Oh, we did, the
Well,
last
if you were
one.
putting in a culvert or, or paving a road, how many hours were the guys there? I mean, the guys work from 7 to 3, Monday through Fridays, and, they're on the time clock. So what you're really talking is an opportunity cost, and that's very difficult to get your hands on. If they're there working at the library, they're not putting in a culvert somewhere. But if they're putting in a culvert somewhere, they're not working on the library. So it just,
But if I,
yeah, go ahead.
there's a difference between capital work and maintenance work, in my mind, and particularly in the area of accounting, because you can depreciate cost associated with capital differently, at least in the private sector, than you can maintenance cost, which you obviously don't. And it has advantages on a tax side. I believe the current timekeeping system of the town reflects total hours worked in a day, but not necessarily start time and stop time. And I also don't think that the town, an employee's time is broken down during the course of the week as to they spend X on this and Y on that, to your point. I offer that might be an opportunity for improvement going forward so that we can, or certainly the town manager can better see what is consuming people's time and resources to a higher level, and also allow the opportunity to allocate time associated with capital to any capital project, so that the finance side of it can be further tuned up.
Yeah, and again, I get all that. And maybe a culvert is a bad example, but for instance, the Anna Street Bridge, which was clearly a capital project simply because of the cost. So, again, it gets back to, it's really more of an opportunity cost. They're doing one thing instead of doing another, rather than allocating $5,000 to the library project just because that was their job for those couple of days. So I'm just not sure it's fair to make that part of the library cost. I get it if we're renting an excavator or removing trees or renting a ram hoe, that all makes sense to allocate that to the cost of the library. But
I think the difference in my mind is that when you're talking about the Anna Street Bridge or the, or putting in a culvert or doing the very different things that the Public Works Department does and does very well, the funding for that all comes from the taxpayers. It's part of the town budget. This project has a somewhat different revenue stream. And so I think, that we can do it. I would agree that I don't know that we want to necessarily get into, dividing the time of just the accounting process of it and the clerical work behind it may end up making it a lost leader, so to speak. But in this case, where we do have a separate revenue stream, that we may be able to help make the taxpayers whole with it, I don't disagree with doing it here. And you might want to even, think about Andre. I mean, Public Works worked on the Andre project as well, and that was a separate revenue stream because it was funded by the GoFundMe and by Legacy Rockport. Maybe we want to do it for something like that. But for the other things that the Public Works Department has done and has done historically for the town, they all come out of taxpayer money, different accounting-wise and things like that.
Didn't we get paid in full for the time, effort, and people and vehicles when we dismantled the mobile home on Route 17?
Yes.
So we got paid for their time then.
Right.
Yeah.
Because we were
So-
billing that,
Well, it was an opportunity for us to get it done sooner rather than later,
yeah.
and they paid for everything.
It was the property owner's responsibility to do that, and they chose, and the town offered to the town services to expedite the process in the best interest of the town, and the property owner had to pay for the removal of the building. They had to pay no matter what. They chose to pay the town.
I thought that part of the concern here was that, the town was very clear about how much taxpayer money should be spent on building the library and how much should be through private donations. And the sensitivity was that by spending Public Works money, and not charging that back to the library, payment streams, that it could be kind of a slippery slope, and that we weren't being entirely transparent with the wishes of the direction of our taxpayers and what we were actually spending on the library.
Well, and I think that's what the manager has done. He's included the amount here, and I
I
think,
mean,
No, I know, but I mean, I think that, and that's why we asked him
Right.
too. But the idea was that I thought that we had said at the last meeting that we wanted to see that money charged back to the library effort.
So that goes back to, I mean, we're spending money that we didn't even have in this year's budget. It was nothing that's there, except for their normal hourly wages and benefits, was stuff that was in the budget.
right.
So, I mean, that's some of the heartburn I have, I think. I
Okay,
understand.
well, okay. I brought it up, I've had my say, and, okay,
Okay.
I'm in the minority, so.
Manager report.
I think one of the things, and it's fine, I mean, you guys set the policy, and that's your job. From the beginning, even from the previous project, the previous library project, the discussion point was the demo of the building was always going to be something Public Works was going to do. And even from the Reed portion of the project, whenever we were talking about demolition of the building, it was always Public Works was going to do that. The assumption was we're doing it one way. It's $5,000 extra. To change that it isn't going to make or break the library project at this point. So it's just a matter of a policy decision and I think, Deb, you put it pretty clearly, as much as we could use that $5,000 for something else, but there's an obligation on the part of the town to show the cost to the taxpayers. The other cost of the taxpayers about the library will be the intersection and that's another, but that will be very visible, and it will be something that will be in the budget this year that the
Right.
voters will vote on.
So, I mean, as an example of offsetting, I mean, you do have in this current year's budget, money for tree cutting and removal. I don't know what that number is, but it's never very high.
Yeah, it's about
So-
$10,000.
So, your $2,800 could be offset out of that line, because it is something that we normally would do. But some of the other stuff isn't stuff that we normally would do and wasn't budgeted for.
Yeah.
Yep, Megan, if,
So I just want to make sure, because your comments are kind of leading me to believe that you don't think this. All of the charges, except for the Public Works time on that memo, have been charged to the library project. They have not been charged to the Public Works budget.
But they've been paid by us without reimbursement this far?
No, they
thus far?
haven't, because all of our expenses
Right.
thus far were paid by the 80,000 that we originally got from the library committee. And then I invoiced the library foundation for any expenses that were above and beyond that $80,000. So the town has not, except for the Public Works time, the town general fund has not paid for any of those expenses for
That's
the
what I
demo.
assumed.
okay.
So it's just 5,000.
Yeah, you're talking about $5,000. And
So the town hasn't paid for any of these expenses?
We
all
have
been
paid the
paid
bills,
for.
but the town general fund,
Right.
so tax dollars, have not paid those bills.
Library
Library,
Foundation
the initial investment from the library committee of $80,000, plus the library foundation
Okay.
is paying for those expenses.
Which was part of the need for the transparency at the last
Right.
meeting, because we didn't know, how these expenses broke down.
All of the library expenses are tracked in their own general ledger account. They're not tracked with the general
You have
fund.
a sub-ledger for the new
Yes.
library.
Yes.
So everything should be in there.
Except the 5,000.
Right, the only thing that hasn't been charged to the library project is the public works time.
Anything else on the manager's report?
So
Or
let's,
you-
let's, is the expense associated with public works time, $49.92, going to be charged to the library project, or how is that expense gonna be handled?
I'm getting the sense from the board, I mean, you can take a vote. It would be better if you took a vote to charge that off to the library foundation, correct, Megan?
I do agree with Jeff that because public works time was used for this specific capital project that has mixed funding, it should be charged to the project. But I also feel that the select board needs to make a policy statement saying that if private and public funds are being used for a project, or if private funds are being used for a project, then anytime those associated costs get charged off to the project. So that we have some consistency in the way that we are tracking projects and time associated with those projects.
Is your recommendation that be done tonight or at a separate time?
Well, I think it really should be an agenda item, and
Okay.
you guys have the discussion about that policy decision and make that decision so that there is clear direction going forward.
I think as Deb pointed out, with this project, there's a definite sense that the cost of the library is this amount of money. And, you know, some of those other mixed projects, it may or may not be the same sense, and that's another whole discussion the board could and should have, I think.
So if you do an agenda item, you could give us other examples of those, and we can make a fully
Sure, or
informed
you could
decision
use
next
like the
time.
Andre project, like Ken alluded to as an example. We didn't charge out public works time to that. Maybe we should have. But any project that we're using mixed funds, or maybe even if we're using tax dollars, but say Public Works is spending 6 days at the harbor putting pilings in, should that Public Works time be charged to the harbor? So I think those are policy decisions that the select board really should make.
Probably for another discussion another time on the policy one.
Yeah.
I think what I heard was the recommendation was for this select board to vote whether that $49.92 is charged one way or another.
Yep, I would entertain a motion on that if somebody wants to make it.
I will move that the $4,992 Public Works time and costs that were spent on the library demolition be charged back to the library fund.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? If not, all in favor of the motion? All opposed? 5-0 vote. Okay, we're still on the town manager's report. Anybody have anything else they wish to bring up?
Where are we with streetlights?
I didn't get a report this month. I don't know. I don't have a report this month on streetlights.
Okay.
Can we have one by next?
Meeting?
By the
Next
28th?
meeting?
Sure. Yep.
Okay.
Have we made any headway on a parabolic mirror for the library corner?
No.
I wonder whether that would have to wait till the project was done, or if you put one up, if it's just gonna have to come down, or what?
Well, I
Did
think
we
we might
vote on
need,
that?
we didn't actually vote on it. I
we
suggested it,
suggested,
but
yeah.
we didn't take a vote on it. I'm not sure that you have to have a vote on a parabolic mirror, but I
No.
mean, it's a pretty small expenditure, I would think.
Well, no,
we
but I
used-
guess my point is I want to be careful of holding the town manager responsible for something.
I'm not holding him responsible for it. I'm only asking him what the status is, and if we need to take a vote, then I would suggest we take a vote on it, because we
I'm
used to have
sending
a
it-
parabolic
I'm
mirror.
sending a text right now.
Okay, we used to have a parabolic mirror at that corner, and
Yeah.
it is very helpful.
It may be that it's stored away someplace down the
No,
road.
it was
No, is it?
25 years ago anyway.
Oh, really?
I think.
No, it wasn't.
Oh, it was up
I've
there
been
in the
here for
recent
20,
past.
I've been here for 20 years, and it
a
was
long
there
time
when
ago.
for the first number of years I was here.
Okay. Well, maybe we could research the history of it and find out
Well, seems
what
how,
happened to it and why it was removed, if it was removed. Maybe it was removed for a good reason, I don't know.
seems how we've talked about mirrors and streetlights, and what about sign permits? Do we know whether the one's been gained for the
I believe it was submitted, but I'm not sure the status on it. I know, I reached out to the
In talk-
foundation.
In
and-
talking with Scott, I mean, it's 3 times the size, I believe, that's allowable. So there again, just trying to keep everybody transparent and doing the right thing.
Mr. Chairman, acting chairman, on some of these items, if there are new issues or things to discuss, I'm not seeing where on the agenda those things might fall.
It's from, issues generated by the manager's report.
Or related to, or that have been brought to to select board members' attentions that involve discussion.
Well,
Do we pile it on here, or do we talk about it during the
we can
manager's
talk about it
report?
here. If it's coming up here, we can certainly talk. We
It's up
just
in
had a
liaison
motion
report.
now that we approved, so if there's something connected with the manager's report that we can do,
I'm good with the manager's report as is.
we can do it.
Just that there's some new items that,
What about the issue of taking votes on things that aren't on the agenda? Isn't that a slippery slope?
It is a little bit, that's true. I think in the case of the Public Works time, it was talked about at the last meeting, it was in the minutes we just looked at, it was in the manager's report, so it was, I think it was clear to the public that it was going to be discussed this evening.
Yeah, in my personal experience as a board president, and, I think that we take a little bit too conservative of a position with respect to that. When the discussion, when the vote arises out of something that we knew we were going to be discussing on the agenda, there was notice to the public that we were going to be discussing that.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I think if something comes up that's totally out of left field and there was
Yes,
no
I agree
notice,
with that,
then
Ken.
it's not fair to vote on that.
my items are just information request or,
Of the manager?
yes.
But this is the time to do that, I believe. With the manager's report, so.
Okay.
Hold on, let me get to a place where I can write it down. Okay, go ahead, go.
It was brought to my attention that a boat sank in the harbor. Could you provide an update on that, or did I get misinformed?
A boat did sink in the harbor. A boat did sink in the harbor, but I don't have any information on it at this point. I know the Coast Guard was notified, the owner was notified. As I remember from talking to Abby, that our ordinance does not allow us, there's not a lot of room for us, and that was one of the things she was talking about, getting the harbor committee to look at, is there something we can do in an ordinance that requires, that allows us to do some preventative things to get boats off moorings that shouldn't be on moorings all winter. I believe it's a pleasure boat that sank. It's not a fisherman's boat. And she's notified the Coast Guard, but I don't know the status of it. I'll get information, though, for the next meeting.
Is, with regards to the harbor, I've had people call me trying to get a hold of the harbor master, and I've directed him to go to your office, Rick.
They haven't come to me.
Well, maybe they got a hold of him elsewise, but they were trying to find a number that they could call. And if we're paying stipends for department heads, shouldn't they be posted somewhere for cell phones? I mean,
I believe her cell phone is posted
well,
to call her cell phone number, I believe. I believe it's posted.
down at the harbor, yeah, but because the person that I was talking with was a member of the press who looked on the site and couldn't find it, because that's what I said, look on the site and you should be able to find it. So that ought to be an update on people's that don't have them on there.
We got one more.
Okay, Jeff?
All right, another one, Rick, just information that was brought to my attention, again, this involves the harbor, that there's a boat that apparently broke loose 4 or 5 years ago that is also currently on a mooring. The pennant is wrapped around the mooring chain. That is ripe for opportunity for chafe and it to break loose again. Is there plan, or what is the path forward on something like that?
And that was one of the things that Abby was saying, that she doesn't have any recourse in removing a boat that's,
This wouldn't be removal, I'm thinking, has the owner been notified of the concern and the
Yeah.
issue, and
is it the one that has been on the mooring for a couple of years? That boat hasn't gotten hauled out recently?
the current issue is the pennants wrapped around the mooring chain under the ball, and when you're up against the shackle and that kind
Yeah,
of stuff, it's
yep.
gonna chafe, and
Part-
it could part ways, and it had a history of doing it before. I'm concerned around the private property and other things in and around the harbor in the event that
I'll
it
find
does. And
out.
I think there might be some proactive activities that the town could do to prevent that from ever happening.
Anything else?
One more. Information, this is continuation of our, I don't know if there's a separate agenda item on the library, but as we march forward to a February 11th discussion and decision around the bond approval, I am asking if we could get a schedule that shows the forecasted cash flow of the project from January 1st to the project completion by month.
Ken?
I've already done it. I've asked for it by quarter, actually.
I'll take by quarter.
I've asked for it for cash flow for the expenditures and from the library foundation and
Right.
the bond proceeds and everything, so that we have a nice, clear picture of
So
what we need.
we can look at it at least quarter, I'm okay with the quarter by quarter, so we can look at it quarter by quarter and have that information. Is that something that Megan can provide, or a review, and,
Once we get into construction, I think that projection will, once we start construction, we'll have a better handle on.
But what I've asked for is
I'm-
just a one-page thing. That I've asked for the
Before you
project,
make it-
the owner's representative, Charlie of Phi, to give us a breakdown of when the costs will be incurred.
yes.
And I've asked the Library Foundation folks to give us an estimate of how their pledges will go through quarter by quarter, as well as cash on hand. We know when the bond proceeds will come in, Megan schooled me on that. And also we'll have the bridge financing, so we'll be able to run it across and see how everything falls into place.
All right, and you're doing that with the coordination of the finance director,
Yep.
and
Yep.
so we can make sure we've got one document. Okay,
That was in response to your request at the,
well, it
Workshop.
was a bit different. My request at the workshop was, what are just the big milestones and steps to activities around getting the donations?
Right, and they're gonna do that as
Okay.
well.
they're gonna do that.
This is an additional request to say, let's look at the
Cash
cash
flow.
flow, so that, I'm not challenging the issue. What I want to make sure is that the project goes very smoothly. And if there looks like the line crosses in Q5 of the project, there's no money to pay for the continuation of the project, and the project would have to stop.
Yep.
And we don't want that ever to happen.
No.
So the key is, let's see what the cash flow looks like, and if there's a point of concern, we can take action 6 months ahead of time to either, in the project planning and scheduling or execution, either slow something down if we don't think the revenue's gonna come in, or we work our behinds off to make sure that the donations and the revenue stream is there prior, so that there's no interruption in the execution of the project.
Right.
That's my only
Yeah.
desire and need, and that everybody has a chance to take a look at it prior to this bond approval, or prior to the approval of the bridge loan, so that we, as a select board, can all be looking at the same information, and we can, with clear confidence, sincere concern, say, look, this is gonna work.
Yeah. My goal is to have that document for
By
the
next
February
meeting.
11th
well, we
meeting.
should
Or
have it
we should
by
have
the
it
next
bef-
meeting, I think.
If we
We'll
could have
see.
it,
That complicated.
Yeah.
if we could have it before, so that we can look at it,
Oh,
absorb,
yeah,
and
yeah.
feel.
Yeah, it won't be handed out that, it'll be available at that meeting, but it should be available before as well.
Right.
But that became apparent at the last conversation that that was going to be a sticking point, that, you know, of getting the board comfortable enough to make that finding, of knowing how the cash flow is going to work. As I was just saying earlier, Megan did a cash flow basically at like 75,000 feet quite a while ago that got us to that $300,000 for the bridge loan. But now we have to get down to closer to 25 or 30,000 feet and get a quarterly update. And then as we start construction, when we get into construction, we'll have a much
Have it
more.
by week. I
Right,
mean,
yeah,
right.
exactly.
We know enough about the project execution and the spending. I'm
Right.
pretty sure that the library committee and the foundation has a good idea of when the revenue's gonna come in. And if we can just put that in a simple one-page cash flow statement,
I'm on it.
okay, I'm done. One more item, and I really will be done.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
to sound like,
Colin's here.
I'm
I
asking.
know. Owen, are you in the room?
Yeah, I'm
Sorry.
sorry. I'm asking, I hope everybody would agree, I'm asking that we expedite the development and completion of the minute meetings, the two outstanding from 2017, and I believe there are 6 from 2018, for a total of 8
Meeting minutes?
meeting minutes
Yeah.
to be written and submitted. And the reason being, I don't want to review days' worth of live stream if I have a question on something. I don't want to bug people. I just assume look at the meeting minutes and see what we have. So Rick, if you could
Yep.
help expedite that, it would be great.
Okay.
I'm done.
Okay.
Sorry.
Do we have what's the status of the job descriptions, Rick? Because they were going to go to Deborah at some point, I think she said, and.
Yeah, I'm a little confused about what the status is actually myself. We've been so much into budget stuff, I have to look that up.
I think that the board some of the board members had gotten you comments on some of those descriptions, and then once those were collected and incorporated as potential changes, I was supposed to take a look at the whole thing from a macro standpoint.
Yeah, the only one I got any comments from was Jeff, that I'm aware of.
well, you did get mine from the meeting, though, about the hours.
From the meeting, from the.
Well,
From the discussion.
From the discussion.
But you had no other written comments. Jeff
Right.
had
was
some.
I sent you via email.
Right.
Written reply.
Yep, you did.
Okay.
That's the only one I have.
So somebody needs to put all that together and send me a packet.
Okay.
Okay.
Is there a way that we can, not to pile that on, but it has been some time, is there a way that we can have that for the next meeting, or Deborah can have?
No.
No.
Oh,
There's
okay,
no way
well,
I'm gonna have it in
Overpromise.
2 weeks by the time they get it to me.
I mean, you know, it'd be a pain in the ass, but, I mean,
Well,
this has been.
February's realistic.
Yeah.
No, but it
Yeah.
should be.
Well, the challenge is that we're heavy into budget time now. I mean, we can work on it, but, the only comments I got was from Jeff, so we should be able to pull those together and get that all to you, so you can look it over. And then the question is, can we get it back for the February meeting? I don't know. So,
Well, if we at least get the next step, if we get them to
Yep.
Deborah, I think that would be progress.
Yeah, and Mark, do you
Mark-
know what Mark's comment was?
Yeah, I think Mark provided comments in email. I know there was others beside myself.
I'll
I've
check.
had some, but I don't remember whether I put them in email or not. That's
Yeah,
the
because,
other
I mean,
discussion.
whatever Mark's comment was, just whether it was verbal or in writing, we need to
I think
include
I
that.
put it in, it was
Okay, well,
verbal at
why
the
don't we do this?
workshop.
Why don't
and-
we say, if you have comments, try to get them in the next couple of days by email, board members, and then hopefully we can prod that on. Anything else for the manager? Okay, next on our agenda is the consent agenda, which includes the annual approval of the safety mission statement, and reception of payment in lieu of taxes from Maine Media College and the Center for Furniture Craftsmanship.
And,
And
Oh, and an anonymous GA donation of $4,000. So
I
there are
would-
four
I would-
things.
Move to accept the consent agendas A, B, C, and D as listed.
Second.
Motion, is there a second? Okay,
Second.
Second. Any discussion on the motion? Everything looks pretty straightforward to me. Again, many thanks for the payment in lieu of taxes from the organizations that are not required to do it. I always say it, it's
Nice.
an obligation, or not an obligation, but an indication that they value the services that the town provides, and it's much appreciated, as is the GA donation. All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Okay, that is carried. Unfinished business, the internal control policy. And we had decided on this agenda to have the internal control policy. I know Doug provided a couple of comments, I provided some comments, and the thought was the auditor is going to be here at the next meeting, and some of this policy was driven by his concerns, so he would be available for us to ask questions of if we needed him at the next meeting. And we wanted to use this time to see if there's any other comments on the internal control policy as it stands right now. We will not be voting on it this evening, but just taking comments, particularly if Jeff and Mark have anything, because I don't think they've been heard from yet. But anybody else too?
One of the things I want to say is that I had expected, having spent many hours on this with Megan, and I would have expected that we would have passed this around to department heads for their input. It really involves their duties, their tasks, to a great extent, and we had some department heads, at least at the internal controls workshop, and it's my understanding that hasn't happened. So I would request that we do circulate the draft to the department managers to give us a heads up of anything that is of particular concern in doing their duties.
Okay. We can do that. Any further comments?
I could just revert for a nanosecond. Rick, I sent you Mark's
I saw,
comments.
I did
Right,
see
but
that.
I would support Deborah's request that the department heads have the opportunity to review the internal control policy.
And I made my comments, you have them in the packet. And Deborah made her responses to those, which there seemed to be a good deal of agreement. And the only reason I put the, but not limited to, is that, I forget which policy we're working on, but we said we wanted to be consistent with that. So I'm fine with the for example, I know it means the same thing, so
Yeah.
it's, that's a semantic issue, I'm not worried about it. So we should have, the goal will be at the next meeting, the January 28th meeting, to have these policies in front of us to discuss and approve at that time.
So I would request that any comments that we get from the department heads that we get quickly, and that, I imagine Megan's probably going to collect them, but Megan share those with me so I can take a look at those and have sufficient time to, to go through those and incorporate those, or incorporate what we think is appropriate.
Will you and Megan have any comments on the possibility of absorbing the credit card policy into this policy at that time, or?
Oh, there we go. Hey, Megan, we got to talk, we should talk about this right now. Thanks for raising that, Ken. There are, as you pointed out, there are sections of the purchasing policy that Megan took from the purchasing policy. Obviously, she didn't take the entire purchasing policy and put them into this policy. And there are sections of, like, the credit card policy, I think, that Megan did similarly. So the question is, to me, in properly drafting this, I believe that if we have other policies elsewhere, we really don't want to, to reiterate them in this policy, because as you've said, and I've experienced over the years, that if you change that purchasing policy somewhere and then you forget that it's in the internal control policy, you're gonna have an inconsistency. It's inevitable. It will happen. And so I don't think that it's a good idea. So then the question becomes, does this internal control policy and procedure become sort of this manual where we have all these appendices, purchasing policy, credit card policy, where those policies live, and then, you cross-reference over where you need to, those policies in the internal control policy? or what? And I think, Megan, I don't want to talk to you, so why don't you come up and talk? But I don't want to talk for you, but I think that you and I had a brief discussion about this a few days ago. And I think that's the way that you and perhaps Rick kind of see this going.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that would be my preference as well.
And say that one more time.
Well, basically, what it would mean is, for example, we would strip out the sections in here on
Yes.
purchasing
It would
policy.
be a separate policy.
And it would be,
Just-
and we
it
would be
lives
the
as a
standalone
And then
purchasing policy, which would be.
reference it, right.
And we would reference it as necessary, and we should, so that somebody doesn't have to go through the whole purchasing policy and employee and say, where was this found? We should reference the specific section that we're, need to reference. And then anytime, any change that's made to those policies, because they're really part and parcel of the appendices of, they live with the internal control policy, and then that's a, clear heads up that you always have to be, if you're gonna amend something, you amend the cross-reference. If you amend the purchasing policy, you're gonna have to look for the purchasing policy within, reference within the internal control policy.
Right, the internal control policy can't just simply reference, please go see subsection paragraph, because you're saying it could be
Yes.
changed.
No, it can. No,
Okay.
I think it should.
I think what she's saying is
It
if
should do that.
if the headings in the purchasing policy change, you have to go back and change the reference.
Right.
The reference itself, but not
Right.
content. All right, I'm good.
Right, right.
And we just want to make sure that we, as I put in my note, eliminate any possibility of inconsistencies.
Right.
The purchasing policy is a big policy, as those of us who've seen it know, and it's, whereas the credit card policy, I think that possibly could just become part of this one, because that's all it is. But then I'll leave that for you guys to figure out. As long as we don't have the potential for inconsistencies, I'm
It
fine.
would seem like if you're gonna, you should be consistent to it one way or the other. It should either live outside and be referenced, or they should all live inside.
Yeah.
After we talked about it, I think it's really important that all of our financial policies are in one place. So you're not going to different books or whatever all over the place looking for our financial policies, that they're clearly all in one spot.
So this sort of gets back to the question that I had in the email chain, where in the reserve accounts policy, there are some inconsistencies with some of the reserve accounts. But if you go to the actual IRC that we're talking about, that seems fine. So what's the procedure then for correcting the reserve accounts policy inconsistencies?
You can just change the
vote.
content in the appendix. and
Yeah, it's
update
just a
that.
table of contents
to-
reference, I think. Wasn't it? There
Well,
was a missing page on a table of contents.
no. This,
Had to do with like the pathways reserve. or
yeah,
something.
under the reserve accounts policy, the purpose for the Pathways Reserve is not really a purpose, it's a
Oh.
description
Then that has to be changed as a policy,
as a policy.
as that policy. And then,
Yeah.
once it gets changed, then it should be replaced. And it should live as an appendix in here.
The IRC.
But when it gets changed, then we have to have it loose leaf enough, that
Right.
that it can be replaced and.
Well, I think it would be helpful for the next time that we know how all these various policies relate to one another, whether they're appendices or whether they're cross-referenced or what it is, just so we're clear on that.
So it would be helpful, I hate to say this, it would be helpful if you would give me the whole universe of the financial policies,
Okay.
right? And then we can go over that together and figure that out. And then the places that we need to strip out, like probably the reserve policy stuff and, for example, the purchasing policy stuff, we can do that. And then we can take a look at things like credit card policy or any of the
Okay.
other ones and see what makes sense.
Yep.
So there's going to be a lot of changes that come back to the board, but it shouldn't be substantive
No, it's
changes.
just
It should be
organizational.
more organizational type
That's fine.
stuff.
Okay.
Okay, any further discussion on the internal controls policy? And like I say, we should have that in 2 weeks.
I would like to just recognize, these things are never fun. I mean, this is about the most boring subject you could possibly imagine. And I just want to recognize Deborah and Megan and others that have worked on the content and the structure for doing something that I think very few towns have, because I've asked, show me your internal control policy, and other towns, some of them don't have what one would expect to be fiduciary responsible. But I'd just like to recognize the folks that have worked on this very hard for their efforts. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
We'll have a model policy when we're done with this. She said today, you started working on it in November of 2017?
first draft of the auditor in November of 2017.
We celebrating its second
Had
birthday.
a lot of fun over that, right?
Let's just have a birthday cake after the first one.
Okay, on to new business. First item on new business is elect a new chair and vice chair. And before we do that, I'll just say that I am currently sitting here as the vice chair, acting as chair in the absence of the chair or the vacancy of the chair. The select board bylaws are silent on, as is the charter, on replacing a chair mid-term. Doesn't say we have to, doesn't say how we're gonna do it, doesn't say we can't do it. So, if the board takes no action, then I would remain as vice chair and act as chair for the remainder of the term, and there would be a vacancy, or there would just be one vice chair, and that's it. So, I leave it up to the board.
I motion that we elect
Beat me
Ken
to it.
McKinley as chair of the select board for the duration of his term.
Second.
Do I get a chance to say anything about that?
Let's see now, all in favor?
All in favor?
As I said early on, if the board wants me to do that and thinks it's in the best interest of the board and the town, I am willing to do it.
All those in favor?
I don't even get to call my own vote.
So, and in speaking of vice chairs, when this first come about, and we put Doug in as chair, the year before that, we tried to get him in as vice chair, and due to circumstances beyond my voting ability, it didn't happen. I think with Doug's great learning curve and his ability to work with the manager and within the town system, I'd like to propose that Doug take the vice chairs through at least the end of this year.
Second,
Well, you mean
Well,
not end of the
it-
year, first
well,
off, it
the
has to
end of
be
the
until
fis-
June.
the end of the fiscal
The
year.
election,
Right.
and then at the organizational meeting, we have to have an
Correct.
we
election.
have to have a vote within 24 hours of the election
Right.
anyway.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, the sentiment, but I think it would be better really if we got someone in to sort of take these next 6 months to get up to speed, so when we have our organizational meeting in June, the succession planning may be a little more obvious.
I understand your sentiment, but I think the select board, as we're structured, where transparency and communication and functionality as a group is such that anybody elected as vice chair, if it were to be anybody left in the group in June, would be up to speed and able to function as vice chair at that point in time, whether they were elected now or not.
Well, like I say, I certainly appreciate the sentiment, thank you, but I just couldn't serve as vice chair right now.
Are there any other nominations? Anybody in the audience?
So,
I guess I would nominate
I-
Deborah as vice chair.
Maybe you can trade off Midcoast Solid Waste.
yeah. Yeah, Doug, you want to take that one?
I could second that nomination.
Got it.
We can do discussion.
Okay, we have a nomination and a second, and I would ask the nominee if she would accept if the board elects her.
I guess so.
Here we
But,
go. That's the
no,
spirit.
recall there are a couple of meetings that I'm missing in March due to that business in New York, so I would.
As long as Ken's not missing
Yeah, I
that same
know.
meeting.
Look at my
Hope that
calendar,
those are not
I'm
ones
gone
that
one
he's
weekend in
missing.
March, but I think I'm here all the Mondays.
But that,
Okay.
the important part of that time frame is that's our budget time. So I don't think you'll be out. I think according to the calendar, right, Megan? The only one that's out is Deb for the budget?
We actually adjusted the whole budget schedule
Oh,
in hopes that all 5 of you would be
Well, I've
here.
got I gotta put some more things on the calendar, because some things have come up for me, but only, in March, only a weekend. February, I will be gone for a somewhat longer period.
Thank you.
What?
You all can still be here for the consensus votes, right? Because that is really what we were targeting to make
If
sure.
they've been
all
adjusted,
five-
we need to,
What's
They
the,
haven't been adjusted since you got the last amended schedule.
I don't know that I've seen the
okay,
schedule,
then
so.
okay.
Would you forward that schedule to us?
Sure.
That would be great. Well, I mean, the nature of of this board is that we're a bunch of active people. Not everybody's gonna make every meeting. If there happens to be a meeting where both the chair and the vice chair are gone, the remaining three, if there's three is a quorum, the remaining three can appoint an acting chair for that meeting and go forward. So, again, I'll ask if you will accept the nomination.
Yes.
Are there any?
That's no
tre-
commitment,
Are there any other nominations?
We could vote it down if you wanted.
If not, all in favor of Deb as vice chair?
Thank
Any
you.
opposed?
Abstain.
Unanimous vote. Okay. Next item on the agenda is consider establishing a building committee for the library project. What we've been working with over the past many months is what we've called the design team, which has been 2 select board representatives. Initially, it was Tom, Gray, and Doug, and then I kind of morphed onto it. And so it's been Doug and I. Ben has been serving on that design team. Ann Philly has been serving on it. And we have had our owner's rep, our architect, our engineer who've been coming to the meetings. Rick has been coming to those meetings, and I'm probably forgetting somebody.
The architect.
the architect,
I
Steve
mentioned- I mentioned
Smith,
The architect,
Okay.
I thought.
Justin Smith.
So this is really the project execution committee?
well,
Building
we-
is a verb as opposed to a noun?
Yeah, I mean, this new building committee basically would end up being, it would not include the professionals, in other words, the architect, the
amateurs.
engineer and the owner's representative. It would be a committee of residents. You know, the proposal is to have a couple of select board members on that committee, and a committee, I suggest a committee of 5, but that's up for discussion. And basically, they would act as the select board's representative for the project as it goes forward. They would help with reviewing the bids as they come in, make recommendations to the select board. They would help in making decisions about minor items as we go forward, like what color are the walls gonna be, what are you doing with this window treatment or that window treatment. They would sort of be the first line by appointing, right now, the design team is a committee that's convened by the town manager, and as such, it is not a public meeting. The building committee will be appointed by the select board, and those meetings will be public. And the building committee members will have to raise their hands and vote on certain issues. So it becomes a sort of a new level of transparency as we move forward, as opposed to the design team, which has been doing a lot of its work. It's been a collaborative process. We haven't necessarily had votes, but we've come to consensus, and it's functioned very, very well. So I envision this building committee as moving into a somewhat more transparent, more public phase of the project and things of that nature. And I'll await any comments from anybody else.
Mr. Chairman, and the other piece is there are going to be some tough decisions that have to get made as we move into the project. And, you know, as the budget starts getting tighter and tighter, there's going to have to be some decisions made. And right now, the design team has people that are paid employees and paid consultants. The goal is to have a group of people that actually can raise their hand and vote and say, this is the direction. We've heard from you, this is the direction we want to go. Because there is going to be some tough decisions that we'll have to face. So,
Largely related to, like Rick says, budget issues, you know, we may not be able to afford a nice, you know, maple floor. It may have to just be, you know, a lower grade wall-to-wall carpeting or something like that.
and those decisions,
Those are not easy. The red versus blue, not too hard.
Well, I don't know if it's all guys making the decision.
Probably
Sorry.
not.
It's gonna be a man cave.
yeah. Deer heads in the wall.
So at this point, you know, I think all we would want to do this evening is decide whether to establish the committee or not, and then we'll have to figure out, perhaps at the meeting on the 28th, how to populate it. We have had some discussions about some, and like I say, there may be members of the design team, Ann comes to mind immediately, who may be somebody we really want in that committee. The select board could decide to take this role itself, but it's going to be a lot of work, and it's going to be a lot of meetings and a lot of things, and I think that with two select board representatives on this committee, that the select board will hear about anything, and as written in the charge, and when change orders start coming in, and we can talk about the charge and change that around if you want. If there's a change order that's greater than 50,000, it's going to have to come to the select board anyway, as per the charge as it's proposed at this point. Excuse me.
So the question on the table currently is the proposal to establish I call it the capital execution committee, but the building committee.
Building committee, yeah.
And then we can work on the details at a different time.
As far as the committee charge is concerned,
Or, you know, we understand the charge, but in some of the details around who's on it and all that.
we can, I mean, I would,
Or do
Right.
that tonight.
I don't have names in mind tonight, if that's what you mean.
Yeah.
I think we probably ought to decide how big the committee should be. I think the reality is that the meetings of the building committee may not end up being that different than the meetings of the design team. It's just that they'll be public, and those townspeople who are members of the building committee will have to raise their hands and vote. We're still gonna have the professionals there, they're gonna be advising us, but the building committee will be the ones making the decisions.
Okay.
Any further comment? If any of you guys want to comment on that, Heaven or Ben, feel free.
I think it's a great idea to have complete transparency in this, and to have.
Come up to the mic if you're going to say more than a couple of words.
Yes.
Okay, Heaven Bartlett, Library Chair. So I think it's a great idea, have transparency, have a meeting with minutes, and the ability to, like, know what's going on, especially for townsfolk. I would love to have someone from my committee to just be able to look in on it every once in a while, maybe a liaison type of thing. But let us know what you need.
Okay.
And, please don't take offense to this, Ken, but, I know you're not planning on running again in June, and I know you've been very involved in this. I guess my concern would be that maybe the select board, and I'm not volunteering, maybe the select board members on it should be, you know, folks that are going to be able to see it through.
That's up to the board.
important.
That's-
But do you think that's important?
Yeah, I would agree. That's important. You know, the board would have two avenues when my term is up, that they could put another member on, or not put me on now, which is fine, I guess, or put another member on then. I could continue as a
As a
civilian
resident.
member of
Okay. Yeah.
that committee, if that was so desired. It would make the committee a little bit bigger, but there's a few different ways you could go with that. But yeah, it's something that's the board should consider.
Or, you know, the way it's, the committee organization can be revised somewhat and not make it required that there be two board members on. So you could have a board member on, and Ken could, you know, if Ken so chose, he could continue on, or you could appoint another board member, if you wanted it, unless you.
Yeah, you could, if you
No more
wrote
than
the
two,
charge. as
no less than one.
At least one
Yeah.
select board member serve or something like that, and then that way, That would be a way you could handle it, at least one, but not more than two, or something like that. if you
I
wanted
guess
to.
I would just hope that whoever is going to be on it now, I mean, it's great that Ken continues in a non-board capacity, but think it might be important to have the another select board person that is gonna be able to have that continuity from the beginning.
Personally, I'd be interested in being one of the select board members. I think with the option of Ken being a public person, I think it would leave room for another one of you folks to get involved with it.
How about you two do it between now and the June vote, and when Ken gets done, he switches into the civilian role, and then I don't mind jumping on.
It may not be, but if you fill it now, there won't
wouldn't
be
be a
no-
vacancy.
There
Yeah.
wouldn't be a vacancy on it.
So I think that's, I mean, we can handle that, and there's another way you can handle that too, is it, when I'm no longer, we can't have three board members there, because then it's a select board meeting.
Could you have one there that's a member of the public?
They couldn't
Okay,
speak.
all right. So
But
can't
what you
speak.
could do is after June, if I stay on the committee, then another select board member could attend the meetings.
Well, I think that's what I said was,
Yeah, my only concern is they're gonna be behind the 8 ball.
Wouldn't replace
Right.
me, so to speak, or whatever. And then you could decide how to deal, I mean, who knows, you may have people on the committee who resign
That
too,
committee,
but you can have two
Meetings
people
are all
in the office,
public.
and the other one
Right.
can jump on.
would they all be live streamed?
I think the charge says, maintain open process, including live streaming
Yeah.
meetings when feasible.
Okay.
Then they're not
So,
behind the 8
so they wouldn't be behind the 8 ball for anybody of us that
Mm-hmm.
pay close attention to
No.
this and are able to watch it after hours.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be good.
I think the concern might be mitigated in that fashion.
Right.
So do you want to change the charge to say, one or two select board members, or do you want to just
I would-
leave it as it is?
What does it say now?
Right now, it says that the members will
community.
include 2 select board
Sure.
members and 3 community members.
I'd leave it at 2.
Leave it at 2.
Okay. And then we'll see where the chips fall in June. Okay, so we need then a motion on this if we're gonna do this.
Do you have one written out?
Yep.
I move to approve the establishment of the library building committee with the charge as presented.
I second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? If not, all in favor? Any opposed? No. Okay, I think that's a bigger step than it might seem, quite honestly, that we've done this.
Yeah, I like it.
And Ben's out there putting thumbs up too, okay. Committee applications. We have 2 applications tonight. We have Megan Dwyer for Conservation Commission. Is Megan here? And we have Owen Casas for Pathways. Who's he? Megan, would you come on up to the podium, please? We have Megan's application in front of us, which looks rather robust.
Yes.
Looks like you have a lot to give to this particular Conservation Commission. If you could introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about yourself, that'd be great.
Sure. I'm Megan Dwyer. I've lived in Rockport for 11 years, but probably none of you know me because I actually work outside the town. I've worked in Orono at the University of Maine. I worked for the DMR in Lemoyne. I also worked in Blue Hill for the Marine Environmental Research Institute. But I wanted to get involved at a more local level, and I thought this committee would be probably the best fit for me, and I would like to be an alternate so I can better understand the purview of the committee and the initiatives they're already working on before I contribute anything. But I do have a background in environmental monitoring, conservation biology, and aquaculture.
Does anybody have any questions for Megan?
No, I just think that we're lucky to have somebody with your
Absolutely.
experience be interested. I think it's great.
Do you interface with the group of high school students around here that do the pond monitoring, or is that something different than your
I think that's the
department?
Volunteer Lakes Association, and I don't interface with them, but I do mostly marine work right now. Right now, I'm the Associate Director of the Aquaculture Research Institute at UMaine.
Okay. And that would be fish farming, things like that?
Right, we work on looking at sustainable aquacultures, from fish farming to seaweed farming, bivalves.
Great.
Thank you. So,
Okay.
we have a motion?
Does anybody have a motion?
I motion that we accept this application as presented.
Quickly.
Second.
Second.
Yeah.
And it's an alternate member, and the term will expire June 30th, 2021.
Make it 2025.
Any further discussion? If not, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay. Thank you very much.
very much.
Thank you for being
Appreciate
willing
it.
to serve.
All right, now for the difficult one.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Mr. Casas.
please step to the microphone.
I think there was a time limit put on there of 5 minutes.
We have Owen standing in for Pathways, and I have to say that one of my first interactions with Owen many years ago was to recruit him to serve on the Pathways Committee when I was liaison to that committee before he was on the Select Board. And he was on the committee for, I think, a year or so, and then he got elected to the Select Board, and then he took over the liaison. So he's had a long history with the Pathways Committee, if you
So we
want to.
know who to blame.
All the extra money and walkability in town.
Does anybody have any questions for Owen?
I motion that we accept Owen's application for this committee.
Second.
And that'll be to expire June 20th, 2021.
This is your opportunity, Mark.
Any discussion, any further discussion? If not, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay. Thank you very much, Owen.
Thank you,
Continued
Owen.
work on
Appreciate
that.
it.
I think you
that
still got
important
3
work.
minutes if you want to use it.
I talk enough.
We now have some resignations, unfortunately, to consider. 2 resignations from the Board of Assessment Review, both of whom have served on that board for a long time. That's a board that doesn't see a lot of action, but when they do need to get called in, it's very important, and there's a lot of training required for that. So that's one of the things that we'll have to do. And I think, I had heard that we had a couple of new people, including, I think, your husband,
Bob Hall,
who
yes.
was gonna volunteer, so that's great. So, do we have a motion to accept these resignations?
That way you spread the germ.
So moved.
It's been moved to accept the resignation of Tony Bates and Larry Lehman from the Board of Assessment Review and send a card of thanks. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay,
You're gonna do the Midcoast.
5-0. So thank you very much to those gentlemen for long service to the town, and in some
good guys.
cases, on more than one.
I think there's a card, there were
Yeah,
cards in
yeah.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're
working
going to work
those
them
around.
that way.
Okay, we've already done the liquor license. Discuss and approve Midcoast solid waste fees.
Oh, yeah, see, he really should have left. Okay, I'm not done. I have to. Did you want me to?
You want to give us we have the fee schedule here. What I don't see is what the differences are necessarily.
Well, there really aren't any differences, and Rick, you've been on the executive committee, so correct me if I'm wrong, but let me just try this. And that is that, in the past, I think that the boards of the towns were supposed to approve the fee schedule, and that hasn't always been the practice. Is that right, Rick?
Yes, right.
And so the board, the Midcoast Solid Waste Board is trying to follow the bylaws and or interlocal agreement and do the right thing here. So I don't know that you are going to see any changes here, although if Rick may correct me on that. But the motion, one of the things that we did discuss at the board meeting, the Midcoast Solid Waste Board, was we didn't want to have to come back to get four-town approval every time we changed the price for, some fairly insignificant item, or the cost to the Midcoast Solid Waste Corporation changed as a result of vendor costs and so forth. So the motion incorporates the concept that we could make at the Midcoast Solid Waste level some minimal changes in those fees. So Rick?
The pieces, there's the disposal of, the fees that are for the disposal on-site, That's things we control, but for the disposal of things like tires and computer monitors and things like that, that go off-site and we have to pay for those disposals, we want to make sure that the Midco Solid Waste Board has the ability to adjust those costs as they go up, so that we can recoup the cost of those, the disposal of things like tires, TVs, computer monitors, fluorescent light bulbs, those things that we don't dispose of on-site. So it gives us that flexibility. A lot of the other things we're disposing of in the, at the facility itself. It's the batteries, the fluorescent light bulbs, the CLF bulbs, all those things that we get charged for those when we go out, and this will allow the Midco Solid Waste Board to make those adjustments, so that we're collecting enough money so that, at the facility for the cost of disposal of those items.
As I recall, we did vote on increasing the bag fees
Yep.
here
Yeah.
several
Right.
months ago, but
That's-
it's the whole fee schedule we have to
Right,
vote on?
Right,
Okay,
that's right.
There's a,
okay,
and all 4 towns are doing this.
okay. Well, I will entertain a motion if somebody wants to make it.
I move to approve the FY19 fee schedule and give the MCSW Board of Directors the authority to adjust fees for minor revenue streams as required.
Have a motion, do we have a second?
Second as presented.
Any further discussion or questions? If not, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay, that passes.
Thank you, Deborah.
Next item is discuss and approve the ORC work plan for 2019. Now, typically, we would have had a workshop on this back in September or October. And then the ORC would get to work usually around November or so and work up through March and then have items ready to present for the ballot in June. This year, because of a couple of reasons, one being that we don't have as many items, and the other being that we have a new way that we're running the planning office this year. We didn't have that workshop in the fall, and the time is growing short for the ORC to do some work, and so we decided to just put it on the agenda and have the board discuss it this evening. There aren't that many items on here. Bill Naypower unfortunately was ill and unable to be here tonight. And most of these things are gonna be fairly boilerplate. Now, the first thing on the list is the short-term rental regulations. The expectation here is not that there will be something ready for June, it's just to get the ORC to sort of have a first crack at it, with some input from the select board, and then we fully anticipate that that'll be an issue that will require probably several public meetings dedicated just to that, because it will affect a lot of people in Rockport who are doing that right now, and a lot of people who have a concern about it. So it's not anticipated that this will be finished up.
I think the goal is November, but even that may be optimistic.
That may be, that's right. So the other items, for the most part, as I understand them, I've talked to Bill about it briefly and to Rick as well. The marijuana plants issue is fixing a loophole, basically, where people can say, well, I can grow 3 plants, but I don't have the lawn, I'll grow them on your lawn, they're my 3 plants, and before you know it, some guy's got a whole field full of the things, and that's sort of an end run around the law as it was enacted. So there's a boilerplate ordinance to do that. And then a few other items that the planning board had brought forward about site review applications, definition of agriculture activities, and some other item, pure construction requirements, and we have some item on that. So at this point, does anybody have any questions on these?
Be interested, our new member, or our new alternate to the
Conservation
Commission, be interested to get her input on this whole aquaculture activities that we're talking about, so.
I think a lot of it is just providing definitions where they don't exist in the ordinance right now, because as these industries come in, like they're dealing with up in Belfast now, way better to get out ahead of these things than to have to react to them when they come into town, so that's what Bill is good at, is at finding these things out, so. And he's given us draft, an early draft of the short-term rental ordinance, and I think that's drawn from a couple of other surrounding towns and things of that nature. And ultimately, the select board is gonna have to decide where we wanna go with that, but I think the ORC can have a first crack at it and to decide, in what zones we want to allow this and things like that. And one of my issues with this is we want to make sure that we're not, cutting off a historical use at the knees that's been going on for a long time without any issues. But by the same token, we want to make sure that the whole town doesn't become full of short-term rentals and then we lose the sense of community. So I'll entertain a motion on this item. Absolutely, come on up.
Hi, David Cockey. For some reason, I happen to have an interest in ordinance stuff, and I actually attended most of the ORC meetings last year. I plan to get an application in to be an alternate member.
Great.
Or whatever. But just with the short-term rental in particular, just a little bit of a question I would have in my mind, and not asking so much for me, just maybe to get a little bit of public, a little bit of discussion by you on this. When I looked at the ORC description in the town website, it talks a little bit about what it does, and it says the select board traditionally shows, I think, the words great deference to the ORC, et cetera. And then Ken just mentioned in regard to the short-term rental that, this is likely to be a significant issue. So I think there might be, I just would have a question as to where's the ORC fall on kind of a scale that at one end would be really just addressing technical questions and looking at language and saying, if this set of words isn't clear, something else could be clearer. That would be kind of one end. And at the other end would be the really coming up with policy proposals, which I think has done somewhat in the past, like with the, whatever you call them, mini storage areas, where I think the ORC really drove that policy discussion. At least that was the impression I had reading in the media, et cetera. So on the short-term rental, I think you might want to think about where, at least for this initial part, do you want the ORC to be in the sort of, this is the technical side, and maybe not submitting a proposal as this is what the ordinance should be, to the other end is, here's, our consensus on what the town of Rockport's policy should be. Just something you might want to clarify before you turn this over to the ORC. Thanks.
Typically, you're right, the ORC, and the ORC, as you know, you've attended the meetings, there's a lot of people who have been on that committee for a long time, and they have a really deep knowledge of the ordinance, and so it's very helpful when we have these issues come up that often they're able to come up with something that works, and they know where the pitfalls are, they know where all the bodies are buried, so to speak. But I think you're right, in this case, I think we have to give them some guidance, because ultimately, the ORC is an advisory committee to the select board. They make proposals to the select board then votes whether to place them on the ballot or not, or to send it back for more work or whatever, and I think that this particular issue is probably going to be one, I would guess it's going to bounce back and forth between the select board and the ORC a couple of times, and so I think, I hope that's what you wanted to hear.
Yeah, like I said, question between policy
Yeah.
and sort of here's a technical proposal, or maybe even here's two different technical proposals.
Well, one of the things the ORC is very good at is, when some proposal comes before the ORC, and this, for example, somebody says, well, I'd like to have this activity at my place of business or my home in this area of town. Okay, well, how do we have to amend the ordinance to allow that? And then the second question is, how does it affect the rest of the zone? In other words, you have a lot of unintended consequences. The ORC is pretty good at that, and I think that'll serve us well in this discussion.
I think this might be an appropriate topic for the same kind of thing that Doug had organized, being like the business owners meeting and the non-resident taxpayer kind of meeting, because I think that in other towns it's gotten that kind of level of
I think so.
controversy. So maybe it might make sense for the ORC to kind of lay out, well, this is what the town has with respect to ordinances thus far that affect this, and, provide that as sort of a an informational place to start. And of course, Bill has provided, some considerations, et cetera, for everybody to consider. And then, and maybe then armed with those things, we do a Doug kind of workshop, or, meeting with residents, just to get a feel for what residents are thinking.
Well, I think there are gonna be some strong opinions on that topic.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
a couple of different, people may have differing opinions, but I
Right.
think we need, as a select board, we need to hear that before we,
Yeah, I think
know,
that's a
advance
good
a
point.
proposal.
Just one other thought I forgot about, I wanted to say. I think without getting the substance of this, it strikes me that the short-term rental, reading about what's going on in other towns and so forth, a couple discussions I've had briefly with people, is there's two questions which get, two different things that get mixed up and so forth. And one is the question of ordinance and regulation, what are the rules? The second question is, what's the enforcement of the rules? And sometimes I think what people are really having issues with is the enforcement, lack of enforcement, uneven enforcement of the rules. But there's a perception that by writing more rules, you solve that problem. And I think a lot of times, those enforcement issues are actually the tougher ones for a lot of people involved with to grapple with. So there is a tendency to fall back on that. And I think, the ORC clearly is about writing the rules, but I would anticipate the select board, et cetera, would be the ones that ultimately will need to talk about how things are enforced.
Okay, thank you, David.
Thanks. Well, what I might suggest is, the work plan as we have it in front of us, it has 5 work plan items. Perhaps, the first one is short-term rental regulations. Perhaps we insert preliminary look at short-term rental regulations or something of that nature to emphasize the fact that we don't expect a finished product by June and that we just want, with the idea that, as has been mentioned, I think we're gonna have to have at least one public meeting and maybe more on this topic. So, does anybody have a motion?
I move to approve the ordinance review committee work plan as amended.
Second.
And the amendment then, Linda, would
Being,
be
the
to-
preliminary, where was it? Preliminary, review of short-term rental regulations.
Preliminary review, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
Preliminary
Number one.
review of short-term rental regulations, okay? Okay,
Big
everybody
mark.
clear on the motion?
Yes.
All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Okay. We don't have any wastewater commissioner activity this meeting. Liaison reports. Who would like to begin?
Just, with the ORC, though, we have another handout here. Is this something we need to make a recommendation on? I just got it, so I haven't really
This is
reviewed it.
just the, basically, it's some of the items that the ORC will get for.
Okay, right, it's not
Bill's-
for us to make a
No.
recommendation.
This is
Okay.
what the ORC be working on these things. and- and
You're just
he has
you're just
a
approving
model
the
ordinance for
plan.
the marijuana
Okay.
issue, which
All right.
should be a pretty quick,
Okay,
It
thank
may
you.
come back with be something completely different by the time they get done with it.
guess is probably not on
Yeah,
that
but,
one.
right, that one's pretty straightforward.
Liaison, who wants to begin?
Back in. The Harbor Committee met just before Christmas. The primary mission there was to review the fee schedule. That activity was completed, I believe, at the Harbor Committee meeting. I was there for the first part of it and then had to leave. Otherwise than that, that was pretty straightforward. The Pathways Committee met recently, and I do know that one of the agenda items there is to review the work plan by town. They've met with Camden, and they're also wanting to connect with Mike, if they haven't already done so, in a meeting to understand the priorities and where things are regarding pathways and walkways, et cetera. So those are the big ones. The Capital Improvement Committee hasn't met since last meeting, which was prior to our last select board meeting.
jump in real quick. Keep Rockport Beautiful has not met. Investment Committee, we're supposed to be putting together a meeting to meet with folks from the hospital to talk about the Weidman Trust Fund that's available to people in town who have trouble paying their medical bills. That's just been a fund that we've sort of sat on. It's been dormant. Nobody's really applied for any assistance, probably because they didn't know it existed. So once we come up with a recommendation, it'll come back to the select board for approval. Not sure when that's scheduled to happen. The planning board, I was out of town for that meeting, and that's it for me. Oh, but I would like to ask the town manager about what the comprehensive plan committee. I mean, are we putting something together to move that forward? Or we kind of stalled.
Yeah, one of those, I can answer that because I'm part of that. One of my tasks was to clean up that document by the end of the year. It didn't happen. I've got to put effort and energy into that in the coming month or two.
But I'll check with Bill Napower about the,
Yeah, because we needed to go to the next phase and get
Yeah.
another committee appointed.
Yeah, I mean, that previous committee did a lot of work.
Right.
With Bill Chapman's able leadership, and it would seem a shame to drop the ball.
yeah,
at
I
this
will
point.
check with Bill right now.
Conservation Committee, last time I was together, they were talking about budget items, and they were supposed to get some stuff together. The parks, I know Dave Jackson had sent an email out most recently that Doug had replied to, just encouraging him to get his numbers together and get them to Mike to be able to insert into the budget for parks. And that's about it. I'm trying to encourage budget stuff.
That time of year.
Yeah.
I think the board already knows that I was contacted by Finley Engineering, who I've worked with in the past on broadband, and the partner from Finley was going to be in town tomorrow to meet with another client in this general area. And so we have, Rick and I have organized a couple of other town managers and select board person from South Thomaston who are interested in meeting with him. So that's tomorrow morning, right, Rick?
Yes, yep. I
And-
had it in my head that it was today.
Oh, oops.
But it's clearly on the calendar for tomorrow. I had it in my head all morning. I went back and set up for a meeting in the back room and then realized, why isn't anybody here yet? And I checked
Yeah.
my calendar.
There you go. Midcoast Solid Waste, can we report on the latest there, Rick, or is that
I would,
not yet?
yeah. We have a
Sorry.
meeting coming up
We
on
have a
the
meeting coming up
the
Wednesday.
21st. This Wednesday?
Oh, is it? Oh, is it
No,
next week?
it's the weekend after-
Sorry,
it's the
sorry.
week after,
Yes,
yeah.
yes, you're right. It's next week, 21st. So not much to report there. We did meet, however, with the auditor, which was the first time in the history of the Midcoast Solid Waste Board, as
I
I
missed that. I
understand
heard it was interesting.
that they ever met with the auditor, and their auditor happens to be our auditor. And basically, I will put this out there, that he has made it clear that we do not have sufficient funding to close the landfill in 6 years or so when it needs to be closed. And so there's some definite financial issues that need to be addressed there. And I'm going to resist the efforts to put me on the finance committee that Camden has been doing.
So is this an opportunity for you to talk to Doug about his taking your place, seeing as how you're taking his place?
Yeah, I'm thinking that's a good idea.
Thumbs around.
I think that's what either.
Yeah.
Okay, for me, cemetery hasn't met, we gotta do that soon. Legacy Rockport will meet next Monday. Legacy Rockport has engaged a database consultant to help them develop a database to increase their awareness around the area, and that's that process is gonna continue on next Monday. Ambulance review, I think they met we met recently, and everything is going well. I don't remember whether they reported on that at the previous meeting or not.
Yeah, but we did get we have, as a result of budget time, we've been working on, what's our increase going to be for this session, and Northeast has agreed to keep their rates the same as this current year's contract and move that into the next year's contract. It's going fine. They haven't gotten hit with fines, so everything seems to be.
Fine.
Yeah, they do have some, there's some language changes that they're gonna be recommending that has to do with training, I think he was saying, but as far as the dollar amount, it's gonna stay the same.
Well, the new structure of the contract at the last meeting we had seemed to be going very well, where we had a performance measure instead of dictating to them, well, you gotta have so many ambulances and you gotta have so many people and stuff like that. They know the business better than we do, and that's worked out quite well. And they're meeting rather high goals that the committee set for them, so that's all good.
In meeting with the people that are working there, some of them I know, things are going pretty good.
Good. They may be looking to other towns around the area to help them, support their business model, and I think other towns are struggling with emergency medical response anyway. It's a tough field because it's hard to find the EMTs out there who want to do it, and the pay for the EMTs is incredibly low for the responsibility they have. We're actually in a fairly good position compared to some surrounding towns with that service. ZBA has not met in a long time, and that's an issue. I've talked to Bill Napower about that. We've got to get them together to at least select a chair. It's one of those committees that doesn't meet very often, but when it is needed, it's needed in a hurry. And so we've got to rustle those folks up and get them together and make sure that we still have a viable group. And I think that's it, unless I'm forgetting something else.
Maybe a question for you, but maybe more for Rick. Legacy Rockport, I think at the last meeting or the meeting prior, you reported out that they approved the funding of the relocation of the power outlet at
Right.
Is that, do we have that in a plan? When's that gonna be executed? I
We
guess?
have the budgeted item now, I mean, we have a price quote from the electrician to do that, and that'll happen in the spring then.
Okay.
Yeah, the quote was from the electrician, which
Yes.
is everything, and then,
Yeah.
and then Legacy Rockport approved funding that up to,
Alright.
the
So
amount that was on
that'll
the
be done.
proposal.
This spring.
This spring.
Yep.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, I have to do that as well. I haven't done them yet. Okay, any further liaison reports? Okay, I do think that we are going to go into executive session again. I'm gonna suggest that we take a 5 or 10-minute break to allow us to sign what we had to sign, and then we'll reconvene and go into executive
o'clock.
session at 9 o'clock and allow people to use the restroom. So that's it for the agenda for the meeting. We're not adjourned yet because we have the executive session, but we are through with our agenda except for that. So, 10-minute break. Are we down? Yeah, you can kill it, because we're not gonna live stream this part of the meeting, so.
And this is not like a topic, it's just that we